Hey everybody, in this video we're going to start setting up EAP-TLS. Now we've gone over the setup of the Microsoft CA, and if you want to see that again, I have another series where I set up a Microsoft CA from the beginning. And we're going to go into Clearpass now and go into configuration and set up a service right now. So we have this wired EVE-NG 802.1x wired. Now this is what we used for the EAP-TLS. So let's just go over some settings here. So it's looking for NAS port type of Ethernet and service type. So that's just the default when you set up a wired dot1x. Authentication. So we're going to use EAP-PEEP. Actually, we don't need that. We can remove that for this. Right now we have that in there. We have test Eve EAP-TLS. And we have EAP-MS-CHAP. So the default here, and why don't we go over, why don't we just create a new wired EVE-NG. Why don't we just create a new one? So if we go here, service templates, we'll just go to wired. So this will be, we'll call it test Eve TLS or EAP TLS. Okay. Click next. So our authentication source is going to be our test Eve AD, which we set up earlier. And I can show you that. I'll show you that next. We're going to select our switch, which is the Cisco switch 1. And next. We're not going to do posture checks. And this is the enforcement setup. So this is where we're going to get into setting up the rules. Default VLAN, let's say it's 70 or so. If so, this is going to be member of domain user, and we're going to also do member of domain admins. So domain user will give 70, and we'll set this to 80. Those are our VLANs. And let's add this service. Okay, so this service has been added, test Eve EAP-TLS wired. And what we'll do is we'll disable this one. And that should be fine. Let's move this up a little, just one at least. Okay, so let's move that up. And there it is. It's in the 13th position. That's so this is how you move it up. You click, and then you pick. It tells you where you want to drop it. So it's pretty nice. Let's click save on that. Okay. So this is our new service. Let's go through it. EAP-TLS, we're going to, this should be the same. Authentication. We're going to remove that. Remove fast. Remove TTLS. Let's remove all of this actually. EAP-TLS. So now we have to, let's talk about this. And I'll show you where this authentication method is. Let's just go through the rest of this. Role mapping, we're not going to do that. Enforcement, here's the enforcement profile. And the last thing we want to do is we want to make sure that the test EAP-TLS. So it created these enforcement profiles, or policies rather. So let's go into this policy. We'll add one that checks the machine authenticated just to make sure. So let's do that. So you go under enforcement policies. So we do not want to, we want to make sure we save this. Let's save it. Okay, so now we want to go to policies and we want to go to our test EAP-TLS policy. And what we're gonna do here is go to rules, and we're gonna add a rule. And this rule will be tips and tips role equals machine authenticated. And our policy on this one is we're going to give it profile. Well, let's not give it that one. Let's give it the correct one. The test EAP-TLS wired profile 1. Okay, so domain users get profile 1. Machine authenticated gets profile 1. And you could change these. So the profiles here, let's take a look at those. Or say no again. Let's save. Make sure we save. Okay, let's go to profiles. And we just want EAP. Let's look for EAP. Okay, there are our profiles. So profile 1 is assigning VLAN 70. Profile, there's the profile. There's the attributes. So we could change, if you wanted to change the VLAN, you'd change it right here. That's being assigned. Okay, we're going to cancel out of there. And okay, the default profile will also assign 70. We'd probably want it to assign something else, something more limited, like a guest profile rather than give it 70, but just for this demo, we'll just do that. Profile 2 is giving out VLAN 80. Okay, good. Perfect. So the other thing that we're going to have to do, let me cancel that. Let's go back to our service. Right here, test EAP-TLS 802.1x. What we want to look at here, it's authentication source right there. Service, authentication. I want to talk about this EAP-TLS. So that is under methods, authentication methods. There you see methods, there's sources. So here's your methods. So if we do the default and anything in brackets, that's the default one. So EAP-TLS is set up for enable, do not compare. So what we'd want to do is create a new one. And that's what we did here, test EAP-TLS. And let me show you this one. So this compares the SAN, the subject alternative name. And I showed you in here, if we look at this, this has come up yet. Okay, it has. So let's look here. This is for the user, I think. No, that's the computer. But here, let me show you for the user certificate right here. So it's going to compare the subject alternative name. And there's the principal, Chris R. And we can see it on the computer itself. If you look in personal certificates, there's the certificate. And you see we have a private key. And we should be able to see the subject alternative name right there. There's the principal. Okay. So that's what we want to do. We want to compare the subject alternative name, and we don't want to enable authorization here. Okay, let's save that. So test EAP-TLS. So that's the method we actually want to use with this service. So let's go into that. Go into the authentication, and we're going to remove this, but we're going to add our test EAP-TLS. And we'll save that. Okay, good. So our services, again, we have this one, the PEEP one, we have that disabled. And we just have the EAP-TLS one enabled. Now, the other thing we have to do is, like I was explaining before, the way that the username comes across, it's in a service, it's in a user principal name is basically like an email address. Whereas we were before with PEEP, we were sending domain /. So what we're going to want to do here is go into the sources, the test EAP-AD, and this has already been changed, but the attributes here, if we go into the authentication attributes, what we want to do is add an OR statement to this filter. So for authentication, if we go to attributes, browse, filter. So it's giving us an error actually on. Well, that's interesting. But if you see right here, the original way that this was written was just the SAM account name, authentication username, object class user. So now we're adding this user principal name, authentication username, object class user. So we've expanded this to be an OR. So that's what that means. That pipe there means this or this. So that's how it's going to work. So we've added this user principal name to allow it to authenticate. Okay. I just wanted to point that out because that's something I found in the Aruba documentation that you can add that. Okay, so I think that's good for this video. Let's move on to our next video where we'll continue configuration of Clearpass. Thanks.